Jim Jordans cannot believe how this investigation went down. The more we learn about it, the crazier it seems. For me, the biggest thing is that we had different levels of engagement in these investigations, and no one knew about it. It was probably the most successful attempt at misinforming the people for long enough for it to work. Jim Jordans is about to point out one of the biggest parts of the investigation and asks, how has this happened? And we never followed up, and it was never pointed out in real time. Let's jump into it.
Chairman.
I appreciate the gentleman for yielding. So Dan Chinko is the primary subsource. A few years before he does this work, he was investigated by the FBI for espionage. Is that right, Mr. Durham?
Correct.
And that case was halted because the FBI thought he left the country, right?
Correct.
Had he left the country?
No.
Where was he living?
He remained living in the place he was living when they opened the investigation.
Right here in D.C., right?
Yeah.
He hadn't left anywhere. He's right here in D.C., and we're going to stop this. And then they go hire him, use the tax money of the people I get the privilege of representing to pay this guy who they obviously knew was a Russian spy. They hire him, who's the source of all the false information. Is that true?
They paid him, they hired him, and they paid him.
Couple $100,000 if I recall, right?
It was over $200,000.
Yeah, and then this guy is hanging out with Dolan, Charles Dolan, who's a buddy of the Clintons, who's also a source for the false dossier that was used to spy on an American citizen. He's hanging out with Dolan. In fact, don't they meet on a park bench somewhere in Arlington, Virginia on New Year's Day?
New Year's Day, middle of the day.
I mean, this is straight out of the movies, right? And the FBI says, but we're not going to talk to Charles Dolan. I mean, this is two of the dumbest things I've ever heard of. They won't talk to, they pay a guy who's a Russian spy who's the source of the dossier. The other source of the dossier is Charles Dolan, who meets with that guy on a park bench in Arlington, and they don't want to interview him. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. But that's what Comey's FBI did. And they're still doing this kind of baloney because Mr. D'Antuono told us so, running operations, running investigations out of headquarters instead of assigning a U.S. attorney, a job you did for a long time and did very well. That is a huge problem. And your report, that's why your report's valuable.
That is exactly the reason his report is valuable. How is it that we have a report stating that we saw these two people talking and the Federal Bureau of Investigations doesn't follow up? Our agencies can't have their own agendas. Our agencies have to have the agenda of the American people, and that is expressed through Congress and Senate. Otherwise, this is just a totalitarianism labeled democracy. Remember, the reason this is happening is because we have Freedom Caucus members in Congress and in the Senate. I understand that those Republicans say it's just because they have a majority. That majority being Freedom Caucus members is the most important part about it. If they weren't Freedom Caucus, they would just be rhinos, and we would be seeing a soft fight, but the policies would keep moving forward. It's as simple as that. And remember, the Freedom Caucus holds themselves to principles and not parties. How long did they hold up the speaker seat? Until they could verify that their presence would have an impact on our lives. And they have done that consistently. If you have not gone to the State Freedom Caucus and made a donation, go over there today. And if you don't have the money, here's the best part. We use democracy. Find out who your local candidate is and make sure you vote for them. Make sure they get elected. Make sure they get supported. They will keep us fiscally responsible, and they can kill this Leviathan. They'll choke it out without oxygen. The reason America is so hard right now is because we feel like we can't breathe. We have no money and everything is expensive. Let's put that same pressure on our federal government in this ABC soup of bureaucracies. I hope you learned something. I'm Tristan with Radically Rational Radio. Like, comment, subscribe. I'll see you in the next episode. Stay resilient.